In Canberra, the lobbyists outnumber the politicians. More than 700 professionals are officially registered, seeking to influence policy on behalf of their clients in an industry with little scrutiny. The public are in the dark on who lobbyists meet and why.
By international standards, federal lobbying regulation in Australia is decidedly weak.
You're only regulating a tiny portion of the industry. Obviously, that creates a massive gap that needs to be addressed.
The current code of conduct for lobbyists is about as strong and effective and cohesive as a wet tissue.
Lobbyists operating in federal parliament aren't governed by laws, rather a code of conduct. The National Audit Office described this in 2020 as light touch regulation.
We need to have a dedicated enforcement agency that's firstly independent, that is independent of those who are being lobbied, and the lobbyists being based on legislation is crucial to that.
For lobbyists who work in-house for companies as government relations advisors, there are no regulations at all.
It's a glaring omission. I mean, look, it might seem a bit self-serving because I was a third-party lobbyist, but it always sort of stuck in my craw a bit that the group that represents the vast bulk of the industry is not effectively regulated.
Sean Johnson worked for one of Australia's largest lobby firms, GRA Cosway, for a decade and says lobbying is a legitimate activity. But he's now a campaigner for greater transparency in politics and says Australia should publish when lobbyists meet with government.
That pub test is people don't like the idea of secret meetings between ministers and lobbyists, or indeed anyone from a corporation.
Independent MP Monique Ryan says she was shocked by the lack of transparency and oversight when she entered Parliament last year, and she's now pushing for an overhaul.
The Australian regulation of lobbying stacks up really poorly if you compare it to what goes on internationally. The US, the UK, Canada and New Zealand all have stronger lobbying regulations than we do.
Lobbying Improving Government Honesty and Trust Bill 2023.
Today, Ryan introduced a private members bill that would regulate in-house lobbyists, introduce fines for breaches of the code and publish ministers' diary appointments.
Speaker, sunlight is the best medicine, and it's time to shine a light into the halls of this place, to illuminate the workings of the light on the hill.
Lobbyist Evan Morehead is a former Director of Strategy for Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk. In 2020, his firm Indepth Strategies was contracted to work on the Queensland Government's re-election campaign, a decision that was within the state's rules but sparked calls for reform.
It's simply an untenable or unmanageable conflict of interest to have someone play a substantive role in an election campaign for a government and then lobby that government.
The Queensland Government accepted a recommendation from an independent review into public sector accountability and culture last year to restrict these lobbyists, known as dual hats.
If an individual plays a substantive role in the election campaign of a prospective government, they should be banned from engaging in lobbying for the next term of office.
Indepth Strategies also worked on Labor's federal election campaign last year, contracted to buy ads and conduct research. 2 days after the election victory, Indepth Strategies registered to lobby in Canberra.
I think there are two salient aspects of the dual hat scenario. One is the connections between the lobbyists as work on the party campaign, and secondly, the confidential information that lobbyists would have by working on the campaign. And those in turn raise acute risks in terms of undue influence as well as unfairness.
Indepth Strategies in a statement said,
Indepth lobbyists all adhere to Section 12C of the Federal Lobbying Code of Conduct, which requires those engaging with government representatives to keep strictly separate from their lobbying activities any personal activity or involvement on behalf of a political party.
Eamon Fitzpatrick, an advisor to Prime Ministers Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard, was also paid to work on last year's campaign.
I've been lucky to work with every single one of these people for the best part of 10 years. And I can tell you, each and every one of them is a pretty high-performing individual.
Less than 2 weeks after helping return federal Labor to office, he set up Fitzpatrick Advisory, which he describes as a proud Labor firm. His LinkedIn profile features a range of photos with the Prime Minister and Treasurer.
I've worked alongside and campaigned with Albo for more than 2 decades. It's always great to catch up with my good friend and former colleague, Treasurer Jim Chalmers.
Ryan's bill would ban those who played key roles in campaigns from lobbying for 6 months.
The reality is that if you work on someone's election campaign, you learn a lot about them. You know how they think and what they care about. And for you then to be in a position where you can use that knowledge on behalf of a commercial interest immediately after the election is inappropriate. It needs to be stopped.
Fitzpatrick told 7:30,
I was not engaged in lobbying activities and I did not establish my firm until after the federal election, as I had not decided on what my next career move would be. I will always comply with any rules and laws that the Parliament sees fit to place on lobbyists. Third-party lobbying is highly regulated, as it should be.
Fitzpatrick also lobbies in New South Wales. He was at a Labor campaign party on the night of Chris Minns' victory in March.
He is a fantastic local member, as well as a fantastic leader.
Nearly a decade ago, when Labor was in opposition, it vowed to end the influence of lobbyists.
Third-party lobbyists will be banned from meeting with ministers, their staff and departments.
But now that Labor is in power, ministers have had dozens of meetings with lobbyists, ministerial diaries show. Fitzpatrick's lobby firm donated to Chris Minns before the election and has now met with the Premier, whom Fitzpatrick has described as an old friend and comrade. New South Wales Labor previously refused to accept donations from lobbyists, and in 2019 even recommended that they be banned across New South Wales. But party records show that policy has changed. In the lead up to the last state election, Labor accepted money from a range of different lobbyists and lobby firms, totalling more than $100,000. The now Premier accepted a number of donations from lobbyists.
When you get a lobbyist donating money or providing gifts, you've got to ask yourself, well, what are they trying to achieve with that? It's paying for access.
Fitzpatrick told 7:30 that he donated
to support the New South Wales Labor team working to defeat a tired, incompetent coalition government. My commitment to and support for the Labor Party is a matter of public record.
A spokesperson for the New South Wales government said it is committed to examining lobbying regulation. In Canberra, a spokesperson for the Attorney-General Mark Dreyfus said the government had no proposals for changes to the code, but welcomed suggestions.
People care about integrity and they want more transparency. The lobbying part of that puzzle is really important, and it will be in the government's best interest to take this seriously because it's not going to go away.